All right, let's dive right in today. We're going to be looking at AI and sleep apnea detection.
Sounds pretty interesting.
It is right. And we've got some cool sources. We've got a research paper
Okay.
that actually ended up being retracted, which always raises some questions.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then we've also got some books about AI in ECG monitoring,
Yeah.
so using AI to analyze heart rhythms, basically.
Right.
So it seems like there's a real push to try to figure out how to detect sleep apnea more easily.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes sense. I mean, traditional sleep apnea diagnosis can be a real pain.
Oh, yeah.
It involves, like, spending the night in a sleep lab hooked up to all sorts of sensors. It's not exactly a recipe for a good night's sleep.
No kidding. So I guess researchers are turning to AI to see if they can analyze different biological signals and maybe find faster and less intrusive ways to detect it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're looking at things like oxygen saturation levels, breathing patterns, even heart rhythms.
Interesting.
Which actually, that brings us to this retracted research paper.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. So this paper was published back in 2022 in Biomed Research International, and it was all about using computational models to detect obstructive sleep apnea. But then later on, it was retracted.
Yeah, and retractions are not that common, so it definitely makes you wonder what happened there.
It does. It's kind of a reminder that science is a process, and sometimes things don't always go as planned.
Absolutely.
So this paper, it mentions using several different biological signals for sleep apnea research, like you mentioned before. Oxygen saturation levels, airflow, but it also mentions using ECG signals.
Right, so readings of your heart rhythm.
Right, exactly. And that actually connects really well to one of the books we have,
Okay.
called Feature Engineering and Computational Intelligence in ECG Monitoring. And this book talks about how even tiny, subtle features in those ECG readings can reveal underlying heart conditions.
Interesting.
So it makes you wonder if they could hold clues about sleep apnea as well.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like there could be a lot of potential there.
Absolutely. And on top of all of that, the paper also throws in EMG.
The electromyography.
Yeah, which measures muscle activity. So they were really trying to cover all the bases, it seems.
Yeah, a multi-pronged approach for sure.
But it's not just about gathering all this data, though, right? It's about what you do with it.
Exactly.
And that's where the AI comes in.
That's right. And speaking of AI, the feature engineering book talks a lot about the importance of databases in AI research.
Right, because AI algorithms need tons of data to learn and make accurate predictions.
Precisely.
So I'm guessing researchers are creating these huge databases of biological signals all related to sleep and sleep disorders.
That's right. The book actually mentions some specific examples like open source ECG databases from PhysioNet that researchers can use to develop AI models. Some of these databases are even specifically designed for wearable ECG analysis.
So you're talking about like smartwatches and fitness trackers that can track your heart rhythm throughout the night.
Exactly.
Wow, that's really cool.
It is, but the book also highlights one of the big challenges, which is signal quality in real-world settings.
Right, because in a lab, you can get these pristine signals, but out in the real world, with a wearable device, there's going to be all sorts of noise and movement that can interfere.
Exactly. I mean, the book even mentions that something as simple as brushing your teeth can create artifacts in your ECG reading.
Seriously?
Yeah, it just goes to show how tricky it can be to get accurate signal analysis in everyday life.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about having the data, but also about teaching AI to filter out all that noise and find the signals that actually matter.
Exactly, and that's where different AI techniques come in.
Okay.
The retracted paper actually mentions a few that are being used for sleep apnea detection, like deep neural networks, DNNs.
DNNs. I feel like I've heard that term before, but I could definitely use a refresher.
Yeah, so think of them like complex networks that can learn from massive amounts of data, kind of like a brain with multiple layers. And you feed a DNN a ton of data on sleep patterns, and it learns to distinguish between normal sleep and sleep apnea.
So it's basically learning to recognize those telltale signs of sleep apnea that are hidden in all that data.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. And the paper also mentions CNNs and RNNs, which are specialized types of DNN.
Oh yeah, those ring a bell. CNNs are the ones that are good at analyzing images, right?
That's right.
But how does that apply to sleep apnea?
Well, think about spectrograms. Those visual representations of sound, researchers have found that CNNs can actually analyze those spectrograms to look for patterns that are related to sleep apnea.
So the AI is basically listening to the sounds of your sleep.
Exactly. Pretty cool, huh?
That's incredible. And RNNs, those were the ones that were good at understanding things that happened in sequence, right?
Yeah, like the different stages of sleep that you go through throughout the night.
Okay.
And RNN can help pinpoint any patterns there that might indicate sleep apnea.
So it's not just heart rate and breathing, it's also the sounds of your sleep and the way you cycle through sleep stages.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many different angles they're looking at this from.
It really is. And to make these AI models even more accurate, researchers use a technique called data augmentation.
Oh, data augmentation. Isn't that like showing a dog the same toy from a bunch of different angles so it learns to recognize it no matter what?
That's a great analogy. You're essentially taking your existing data and creating variations of it.
Got it.
Which helps the AI model recognize patterns even when the data isn't perfect. Like the kind of data you get from a wearable device at home.
So they're training it to be like a sleep apnea detective.
Yeah.
Able to spot the clues, even in the messy real-world data.
Exactly. And the results so far have been pretty promising. Some of these AI models are hitting some pretty impressive accuracy rates for sleep apnea detection.
Oh yeah, like what kind of numbers are we talking?
Well, the retracted study mentions some models getting over 90% accuracy.
90%? That's amazing. But you did say earlier that we need to be a little cautious about those numbers since that study was retracted.
Right, exactly. Because there could be some underlying issues with the data or the methods they use that led to the retraction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we can't really take those results as like definitive proof.
Right.
Plus, the results can vary a lot depending on which AI techniques they use, the quality of the data, all sorts of factors.
So while the initial results are definitely exciting, we need more research to really confirm how well these AI-based methods work out in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also need to keep in mind that this isn't just about numbers and algorithms, it's about people's health and well-being.
That's a really good point. Even if AI can analyze all this data, we have to think about how it's used and who has access to it.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, the feature engineering book touches on this a bit.
Okay.
It talks about how people feel about wearable health tech, like those smartwatches and fitness trackers that can monitor your sleep.
Right, those are super popular these days.
They are, but I can see why people might have some concerns about the accuracy of the data and who can see it.
Yeah, it's pretty sensitive information.
Exactly. And the book found that while people are generally pretty enthusiastic about the potential benefits of these devices, they're also worried about things like accuracy and data security.
Which are completely valid concerns.
Absolutely.
It seems like there's a lot to think about as AI starts to become more integrated into healthcare.
Yeah, it's kind of uncharted territory. We really need to make sure that AI is being used responsibly and that it benefits everyone.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for AI and sleep apnea detection?
Well, imagine wearable devices that can not only detect sleep apnea, but also give you personalized treatment recommendations.
Oh, wow. So instead of those bulky CPAP machines, maybe something more comfortable and easier to use.
Yeah, exactly. Or even imagine AI helping to develop totally new treatment options that aren't invasive at all.
That would be amazing.
It would. The potential here is huge.
It really is. But it's important to remember that AI is a tool. It's not a magic solution.
Right.
It needs to be used carefully and thoughtfully, and always in conjunction with human expertise.
Well said. It's about finding that right balance between the power of AI and the wisdom of human judgment.
I like that. So to wrap up this segment, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Imagine a future where AI can analyze not just your sleep patterns, but also your genetics, your lifestyle, your environment, even your gut microbiome.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
What could we possibly do with all that information?
Well, with AI, we could potentially combine all of that to develop these incredibly personalized and predictive models for sleep apnea.
So instead of just reacting to sleep problems, we could actually be proactive in preventing them.
Exactly. Early intervention is key because sleep apnea, if it's left untreated, can have some really serious consequences for your health, like heart problems, cognitive decline, your overall well-being.
So it sounds like we've only just scratched the surface of what AI can do in healthcare.
We really have. There's so much more to come.
Yeah, it really seems like AI could revolutionize how we think about and approach sleep apnea.
It really could.
Moving from just treating it to actually preventing it.
Right.
But, we've been talking about this retracted research paper, and it makes you wonder, how do we know what to trust when it comes to AI research?
It's a good question, and I can understand why people might feel a little hesitant, especially when you hear about these retractions.
Yeah, as someone who's not a scientist, it can be tough to sort through all the information and figure out what to believe.
Absolutely, but even with the retractions, AI research in this area is moving forward in some really promising directions.
Okay, that's good to hear.
And there are some things you can look out for that can help you navigate all this information.
Like what? Give us some tips.
Well, first of all, don't just rely on one study or one article.
Right.
Always try to look for multiple sources of information.
So compare different findings and be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true.
Exactly, especially when it comes to something as important as your health.
Right. Don't just take one study as the gospel truth.
And pay attention to where the information is coming from.
Oh yeah, like is it a reputable scientific journal, a well-respected university?
Right, or is it just some random blog with an agenda?
Okay, so multiple sources, reputable sources, what else?
Look for studies that have been peer-reviewed.
Okay.
That means other experts in the field have actually looked at the research and evaluated it for quality and accuracy.
So it's like a stamp of approval from other scientists.
Exactly.
Got it.
And, don't be afraid to get a little bit into the details. Look at things like the sample